Hey class, this is a quick example of our simultaneous contrast project. It's also labeled as color interactions. Simultaneous contrast is basically means contrasting a background color with a smaller proportion of foreground color. Proportion is extremely important in this assignment. The amount of color affects how you manipulate a color and how it is manipulated. So if you want to manipulate a color, you need to choose smaller proportions. So if you were going to choose to, let's say, start with a rectangle, let's go ahead and choose a color. If you wanted to manipulate a different color with this green, you would want that color to be much smaller. So we'll choose about that size and center it within your green. That is the amount of proportionate difference between your background color and your foreground. And I have specific parameters in terms of choosing the like a 2-inch background, 2 by 3 inch background to a 1/2 inch squared color in the foreground. So that's going to help you. So let's get rid of that. So simultaneous contrast means you will be looking at two colors at once. So let's do the traditional red and green. So we'll sink that in. So whenever you see complementary colors simultaneously contrasted, you're going to get a visual buzz. And what that means is that if you stare at the red for more than 30 seconds and it saturates your cones, remember your cones are about color, perceiving color, then whenever you look away, you're going to see an after image. And that after image is going to flip, where the background will look like the red, and that little tiny square in the middle will have this sort of really fuzzy green after image. Okay, so go ahead and stare at the green and red. And like I said, you have to saturate your eyes, so you can't look away, you have to stare for at least 20 to 30 seconds. And then when you look over, you'll see this after image. So that's interesting. What's happening is that your red cones and green cones are becoming oversaturated. And what it does is it seeks relief and it sees the opposite. So that's kind of how complements reinforce each other. So when you're staring here, your mind is already filling in the green, okay? It wants to see its opposite. So those complements, when sitting on top or next to each other or simultaneously contrasted, reinforce their properties. So the red feels redder and the green feels greener, okay? So that ability to manipulate through that after image effect really opens up the world in terms of artists and designers and web designers in manipulating how color is perceived. So if you've watched the Buloto TED Talks, you will see right from the beginning that color is completely reliant on context. Context is how we perceive an actual color's traits. So here the red on the white is a very simplistic contrast and a simple context, but I can change that and let's place a different color behind the word context in red. And what I'll do is actually choose, let's say, an even redder red from the opposite end. I'm gonna put that behind it. And I don't know if you can tell, the word is there, but it's extremely difficult to see. And now that red that you perceived as extremely red before does not feel in any way as saturated because I've overtaken it with a larger proportion of red, and a red that you are perceiving is even redder than the word I originally used. So that's how what I mean about color is reliant on context in order to understand. So let's get rid of that. So let's go to our assignment. Your assignment's going to require 2 background colors and sometimes a single foreground and sometimes a double. So you'll need between 3 and 4 colors to do each of these 5 assignments. And you're going to have to achieve a certain problem. So it'll ask you create one value as 2. So let's start there. This is my single color that I've used in both studies. And just to prove that to you, I've left everything separate. And there you can see it's the same color. And over here it turns more into a blue because it's on an orange background. And over here I'm on a bluer background. So we perceive that color as more of a gray, a green gray. And in order for me to grade these, you guys have to give me the color in context and out of context. So if you're using the same color, give me 2 squares so I understand that this color is the primary color here and this color is the color here. And in this study, I've used orange and blue to alter both the hue and I've altered the value. So in this blue background, this ultramarine or cobalt blue, I've taken this desaturated blue-green and really removed the blue away. So the reason that is because I've put a truer blue behind it, and when they're together and you're reviewing these 2 colors simultaneously, your brain says, well, that's a blue. That means that this one is far less blue, and you will perceive it more as a gray. Now that same blue placed in its complement, which is orange, is going to bring out the blue in its nature, okay? So the colors that you choose to manipulate, you should choose tertiary or secondary colors that are closer to neutral than saturated. Think about weak colors as being more manipulated. So these colors have many properties ingrained in them. For instance, they are not perceived as simply blue or simply green or simply gray. They're a little bit of all of these things. They're tertiary colors, they're 3rd generation colors, and they're greatly, greatly broken down from the saturated form. So they are easy to manipulate. Now the colors that you want to use to manipulate those can be the more saturated colors. But if I reversed this and tried to manipulate this ultramarine color, it would be really difficult because it's highly saturated, highly identifiable, and therefore I can't get over this color easily. I can't put a more saturated blue over it very easily, although I might be able to. So remember when you're making your choices that the more saturated colors are going to work better as your browns. So in this study, I have chosen a neutral blue-gray, and I've placed it within a sort of a close to ultramarine or cobalt blue, and then a slightly lighter but saturated orange. And in this way, this color on a darker ground looks lighter, so the value looks lighter. And this color feels slightly darker than its background, so its value has shifted. So now it feels light, and over here it feels dark. And then in this instance, I wanted to bring out its blue nature, and in order to do that, I reach for its complement. So to bring its blue out in its nature, I surround it with orange. Same color over here, I put a very, very true blue behind it, and I remove the blue from its nature, okay? So now let's check out what happens when we try other colors. Same color, nothing's changed. Here's the color here, same color. Watch as I shift over. Now it looks very green. So I perceived that that color had this natural green in it. And in order to bring that nature out more, I chose its complement. So I chose the magenta. and that magenta is really bringing the green out. And then in contrast, this one feels even more blue than it did before because of how different the hues feel now. Okay, now to show you what happens if you put the wrong red, I thought this was interesting. We'll turn off the magenta and do an orange red, like a Coca-Cola red, and then the effect is greatly diminished. Now this is an interesting fact that might help you when you're choosing your complements. So this is clearly not a true complement. This is a slightly off. Remember when we talked about biases in color? The magenta is a truer opposite of that blue-green, and therefore the effect is greater. This effect is slight, it's still there, but it's more diminished, which means you have not chosen an exact complement. So this is a really good test to see if you're getting close to choosing accurate complements. So let's go back to the more accurate magenta or alizarin crimson. There. And with this, I'm getting a better reaction, okay? And in here, I would say this is a better example of a hue shift rather than a value shift. With the blue, you really saw the difference in value, but with this pink, we're really seeing a strong shift from a green to a blue with the same color. And once again, you have to always show me if you're using the same color or two different colors, okay? So that's a great example of working with one color with two different backgrounds. Now we can also try to make two colors look like one, and that's the harder one, so do it last, okay? If we're going to choose two colors, still choose neutrals. So let's pick something close to this. So take your dropper and hit your color, double click on your color, and what you can do is shift the bar, and what you'll get is the same value but a slightly different shift in hue. So let's go down a little, and let's go ahead and change one of these colors. Okay. Now it's going to look even greener. Okay. So now I have truly two colors, and the difference is slight. But now if I switch these, I actually might create more of an equilibrium in their appearances. So if I take this one over here and take this one over here, now what I've done is pretty much created two hues that look like one. Now it's not always going to be that easy. I set myself up well for this. I knew if I chose a different version of that blue-green without altering its value, I would get this shift. So now I've given the illusion that I'm showing you the same color, but I'm actually giving you two. Okay? So you have 5 studies to create. You guys can use your ColorAid or Photoshop. Photoshop is really fast and easy, especially if you come over here and create these layers where you can turn off and on the layers in order to get differences. Okay? So go ahead and set your border up. If you do it in the computer, just keep the proportions about this. If you're doing it on paper, do a 2.5 border all the way around with a 2-inch by 3-inch background color with a 1/2-inch square color to manipulate. Really make sure that these are aligned. The closer they are to each other, the easier the illusion, okay? The further apart you put them and the more irregular these are, the illusion is diminished, okay? So you really want to maintain the format. Okay, I hope that helps with your color interaction assignment.